Hi, this is Dr. Brian Armstrong, and this recording will provide feedback on the draft of the second Applying the Concepts paper. And in reviewing the drafts, there are 8 things that stood out. These will not apply to everybody. Part of the idea is that you will identify which of these is at most at issue in your draft, and then you will hopefully be able to use some of the things I talk about in order to revise that draft and score more on the final draft than you otherwise would have scored. First, formatting. Always keep in mind that formatting counts, and so please make sure you have your papers formatted correctly. 2 students have volunteered their drafts, so we'll be looking at some samples that are correctly formatted. So if your paper does not look like theirs, then that means something needs to be fixed. Okay. Second, one thing that's come out in many of the student meetings I've been having over the past few weeks is attention with respect to your expectations regarding what a paper is versus my expectations regarding what you're doing in these Applying the Concepts papers. The idea here is that you've been trained to write in a very particular way. You've been trained to identify a claim in an introductory paragraph, provide 3, maybe more, supporting paragraphs, and then offer a conclusion in which you largely summarize what you've already said. I am intentionally asking you to approach writing in a different way. As you look towards graduation, especially as you look towards being an upper class student, a junior or senior, you will be writing in many different venues for many different reasons in many different ways. And one of the things that you need to become more comfortable with as you go through your undergraduate career is writing with different purposes in mind. For our purpose, for our papers, the purpose is not to write a formal essay. Instead, it's to use writing as a means of digging deeper into a text so that we can understand the way to live represented by that text better. The idea is that you will end with a claim. That final section, the inference section, is where, on the basis of your applications, you infer, you think your way into a claim, a more significant, meaningful claim about what that figure or that culture believes the way is. And so this is a very different way of approaching paper writing. And if you're feeling that tension, that's not unusual. That's to be expected. Third, the unity. So as you move forward in the semester while writing these Applying the Concepts papers, do keep the unity of the paper in mind. You have these different sections, an opening concept section, perhaps a second section that focuses on context, your first application, your second application, and your inference. If your inference is to work well, then you need to make sure that you are careful about the concepts you choose, the context you choose, and the pieces of the text that you choose. Ideally, they should all work together to give you deeper insight into what the way is for this particular culture. And so you might think of the unity as driven by the question, what is the way? What is the right way to live according to this founding figure, according to this traditional cultural perspective? Everything that you write should help you develop an answer to that question. In a standard essay, the answer might come in the introduction. Here you're working your way to the answer. But it's good to always have that answer in mind so that your paper has more unity. 4, overwhelmingly people did not add a context section. Keep in mind that with a context section, by adding it, you have the chance of earning more points. I'll point out some ways in which you could add that to a philosophy or a Confucianism essay when we look at the 2 sample essays. Precision, another thing we'll talk about when we look at the 2 samples is being precise with the concepts. And a third thing is being precise with respect to the text. And if time remains, I'm trying to keep this to 20 minutes, I want to say just a little bit about the difference between applying concepts versus context. It's understandable that you would be confused about that. And I want to say some final words about what you should be doing in the inference paragraph. So let's look at a paper. So this is an actual student paper. I've met with the student, and we've worked to make this, to identify what the student could do in order to make this a deeper paper. I don't want to, the student is anonymous, but I will use she in both cases, not because necessarily the paper writers are female, but I think 85% of you are female. So it's just makes the most sense to use she as our pronoun. As we open up, keep in mind that the more precise you can be, the more you can spell things out, the better off you'll be. For instance, in introducing Sui Shen, we have the short definition: Sui Shen is self-cultivation. We have the additional claim that the cultivation of the self is an ongoing process. And essentially that's it. There is so much more that could be said about Sui Shen, and the student needs to say that if she is to earn more points. Likewise, Qi. We're told that Qi is figurative, literally means mist, and it embodies an almost visual form of energy. Again, I would expect a good deal more here. And Qi also is not a figurative, it's not simply figurative. Qi literally is mist, and it is the literal energy that flows about in you. This is a place where I might expect someone to talk about how my energies, the flow of things in me, can be internal conflict. I can be divided against myself, or it can lead me into conflict with others. With respect to myself, the most basic form of conflict is when I have something that I ought to do, but I do not want to do it. My instincts and impulses push me in an opposite direction. Sui Shen should help change the flow of energy in me so that I come to instinctively want to do what I socially ought to do. This is talked about in the slides, and my expectation is that you would, if you want to earn more, this is the kind of material that you would need to work in order to flesh out and deepen your presentation of the concepts. And so, in terms of the connection, I would also be looking for a much stronger statement with respect to how Sui Shen enables us to cultivate or configure or direct the flow of Qi so that we can achieve the harmony that we desire. The student did pick a good analect. A young man should be filial with respect to his home and respectful of elders. If he has any energy left over, he may study the refinements of Wen. The student goes on to talk about how Confucius is being slightly mocking here. This is her own thought, and so I would urge you, when you're thinking for yourself, make that clear. So I would want the student to write, it seems to me, or I believe, that he is saying this last phrase, if you have any energy left over, you may study the refinements of culture, Wen, the 6 arts. The student should say that this is her belief and then explain why she believes it's mocking. Otherwise, I might become suspicious of why she thinks that believes that he's mocking. Is it because she's read something on the web? Is it because she's read Edward Slingerland, the translator's commentary? Is it coming from one of the Confucian commentaries on this analect? Make sure, if your thinking's your own, that you draw attention to that by stating that this is what I think and here is why. Also, do make use of Slingerland's commentary, and when he notes it, the commentary of later Confucian scholars. For each analect, there is a good, in many cases, a nice long paragraph or two in which Slingerland and other Confucian commentators spell out what they take the analect to mean. Make use of that. In any case, let's see, we might say here that the young man, his Qi is in conflict with what he ought to do. So he struggles to do the basic thing, respect his elders. Because of that, he does not have much energy left over for the 6 arts. Ideally, that must change. He must cultivate himself so that it becomes natural and instinctive for him to respect his elders, so that he has the energy left over to engage in the study of all 6 arts. The student then, how are we on time? Oh, we're good. The student then goes on to another analect, this one talking about music, And this is good, a good analect. What's missing is a clear sense of what the arts do and how each of the distinct arts work. And so what I recommended is that this student come back here and add a context paragraph. In the context paragraph, I would imagine you would spell out the background context or the generic context that we need. In the context paragraph, you might explain how Master's literature works with its scenes of instruction. You might talk about the chaotic times in which Confucius taught, and about how Confucius was constantly looking back to a golden age, the earlier period of the Zhou dynasty, in which Chinese society was in a state of harmony. He's constantly, the whole point of his way is to enable people to restore that golden age harmony. It's also here that you might talk about the 6 arts and what the 6 arts are. In particular, if you go to our concepts, underneath the listing of the 6 arts, there's a link to a book. And if you search for music in that book, it should take you to pages, or provide as a choice, pages 50, 51, 52, 53, 54. And there they talk very well, and some of it's in the words of Confucian scholars, about the 6 arts and how music is like the other arts and how music is distinct from the other arts. Looking at that source might help the student explain more fully how music is an important art, and how it's like other arts and how it's different from other arts. Some compare-contrast might work well here. Last but not least is the inference. And one of the most frequent questions I get is, how can I do something that's not just summarizing? And you can do that by saying something that's not said in either analect. So, for example, in this case, we have the first analect, which says that for a young man, much of his chi, his energy, is used up in the basic act of respecting elders. And he does not have much energy left over to study the 6 arts. But if he does, he should. And then we focus on one of the 6 arts. And there the student might talk about how the arts are all similar, but what makes music unique and required. We can infer from this, then, that self-cultivation is an ongoing process in which one goes through stages. So there are many, many things one must master. Initially, one must respect one's elder. Then one must master not just one of the arts, but all 6 of the arts. And then, eventually, one must go on to take a role in society and become an active member of society. Each step requires that one have mastered fully the previous step, and each step contributes something unique or valuable to your development. Even in the case of the 6 arts, music establishes unity among people of different levels in society. Ritual makes clear the distinction between different levels in society. Archery deals with competition and conflict in society. Calligraphy deals with self-expression in society. So each of these arts cultivates some aspect of the self and helps one to bring one's instincts into harmony with how one ought to establish unity with others, respect differences from others, engage in competition with others, express oneself to others, and so on and so forth. What I'm saying now is not something said in either of those analects individually, but it's something we can think up that follows from looking at those 2 analects together, especially if we put them in context. So that, in essence, is what I'm looking for in the inference. I want a clear answer to the central question, what is the way? How does the way work? An answer that comes not from either the analects individually, but that comes from both of them working together. Let's look also at this paper. So this is on Greece. And again, we have similar sorts of problems with the concepts. And note, this is a good draft, a good starting place, and this student can quite easily go deeper into things on the basis of this draft. If we look here, though, we see that teleos is very simply defined, right? Teleos is a key concept, and all we're told is that I'm not even clear if we get a definition of teleos. So we would want a definition of teleos. It is perfection. And then we will want to know more clearly why eudaimonia requires one becoming perfect, and how catharsis plays a role in that. Here's where I would expect someone to spell out that teleos is connected to the idea of telos, an end or purpose. So everything has an end and aim, a purpose for which it is designed. The human being has many purposes or ends. We have our appetite, which aims to satisfy desires. We have our feelings, which leads us to value things in the world in a certain way. We have our mind, which produces beliefs. So we produce desires, we produce beliefs, we produce feelings. Each of these things can work well or it can work poorly. Also, these powers in us, the power to desire, to feel, to think, these can work together or they can be opposed, in conflict with each other. The idea behind catharsis is to provide a process by which we purge ourselves of bad desires, bad feelings, bad beliefs, and it's a means by which we bring those parts of ourselves, our thinking, our feeling, our desiring, into harmony with each other. As we purify ourselves, we perfect those different powers in us, the power to desire, to feel, and to think. And it's that perfecting of the self that is eudaimonia. So eudaimonia is achieved when I have perfected myself, through purging myself of what is bad, what is false, what is out of sync. This is what I would expect you to develop here. I would also expect some context, perhaps some background about how the Socratic dialogues work, what Socrates was trying to do when he talked to other people, the way that life in Athens worked, what eudaimonia was in particular for Athenians. Many Athenians defined eudaimonia as developing a good reputation, looking good in the eyes of others. And in that context, Socrates is challenging them to not be good in the eyes of others, but be good in themselves. You might also talk about his fate. In this case, the student, in a sense, has that context paragraph here, where she talks about Socrates' fate. And as we talked more about this, we realize that Socrates' fate is to die for impiety. And if we're aware of that as we read this dialogue, and if we become aware of the fact that Socrates is, in fact, exhibiting piety here, we realize the deep and disturbing irony found in the fact that Socrates, perhaps more pious than anyone in his society, will be put to death for piety. And he'll be put to death by citizens such as Euthyphro. Euthyphro was not a part of the vote to condemn Socrates to death, but he is a representative of a typical Athenian. So that context should go here, explaining how the dialogue works, explaining the situation in which Socrates was operating, explaining perhaps something about what Socrates was trying to do. I also had questions about what to focus on in terms of passages. Simply put, you may focus on one of the moves, like Euthyphro's first attempt at a definition, his second, his third, his fourth. You could focus on a particular claim that Socrates makes. Socrates quotes a poet on fear and shame and claims that the poet is wrong. Euthyphro claims that he wants to be wise in the eyes of others. You could focus on that claim. So you could focus on a particular claim or on a particular definition or on a particular move Socrates makes in order to undo a definition. In this case, most of the action is skipped over. The student works up to the idea that after a discussion of piety, Socrates sees Euthyphro's intentions behind persecuting his father, which is simply for his own glory and respect. So the irony here is that Euthyphro claims that he's trying to be pure, that he's trying to purify his household because the household is polluted through the death of the servant. Of course, Euthyphro will pollute his house by disrespecting his father. So it seems that no matter what he's doing, there will be pollution. Socrates realizes this conflict. He realizes that Euthyphro seems to not have an answer to the dilemma of what he should do, and he quickly unearths the fact that Euthyphro seems to be motivated simply by glory. He wishes to look good and wise with respect to piety in the eyes of others. This discussion in which Socrates shows that That's what should be unpacked in this first application. We should see how Socrates is trying to perfect Euthyphro by enabling Euthyphro to see that his desire for reputation is bad and is leading him to think poorly. That's the sort of thing I would look for. And then in this case, we still need a second application. But I think I'm at my 20 minutes. I'll stop there. So do try to be more precise as you spell out the concepts. Do be precise in using the text. Quote the text and make sure you put the text in context and explain how it works in light of the concepts. And this should put you in a position to say something that is said in neither of the passages alone. As for application of concepts versus context, I hit upon that a little bit, perhaps not enough, but we can leave that more for next time. It's been 20 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and stop here for us.